speaking of a lost hall of records, a sacred hall of knowledge below the GIza Plateau.
Is this recent discovery below the pyramids the only anomaly in the region?
They should be like, oh my God, like look at all this actual evidence, not speculation, not like, look, you're looking at physical geological evidence, physical erosion evidence, and then all the stuff with the structure that lines up exactly with the stories. It's fucking wild.
There are a number of historical artifacts in ancient African history that simply do not fit with the current historical narrative. When historians encounter these facts, they simply dismiss them as natural formation or provide explanations that indicate that they are not what they appear to be. And yet, when we look at the data, and when we look at what those artifacts are telling us, our view of history suddenly broadens. And the 6,000-year-old narrative of human civilization is shattered by the weight of the evidence. This compilation of ancient artifacts and facts from Africa is in no particular order, nor do we claim to know their validity. I'm only relating what we know with you. But as you watch, please keep an inquisitive mind and research them for yourself. As always, sources will be in the video. A mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its lower dimensions. Southern Africa, about 150 kilometers west of Port Maputo, Mozambique, archaeologists discovered the complex ruins of a giant stone city thought to be built by an advanced ancient civilization. Researchers determined the age of the site by measuring the erosion rate of the dolerite. According to many, this historical find may rewrite history as a study that shows the 1,500 square kilometers metropolis was built between 160,000 and 200,000 years ago. The walls of this ancient southern African city are made of dolerite. By calculating the rate of dolerite erosion, the structure itself has been dated to 200,000 years old. Although this date has inflicted a controversy among historians and archaeologists on its authenticity. There are ruins of huge stone circles in the ancient site that are buried in the sand, and most of which are not visible through naked eyes. These strange circles have been found in the aerial view and satellite imagery. To understand how large this civilization is, it is estimated that 10 million of these structures are spread out throughout the southern African landscape, and there is very little study being done on these. They are almost ignored. A civilization of any age that existed with evidence of 10 million structures spread out over 10,000 square kilometers should be absolutely studied. And when you look at the original formation of these structures, made out of hard stone, you cannot but wonder why they built so many of these out of stone. Where Egyptian pyramids and Mesoamerican structures are thought to be the oldest advanced structures in the world, being not more than 6,000 years old, these prehistoric yet complex ruins have baffled many researchers. It has roads joining complex circular structures with agricultural areas indicating that it belonged to a highly advanced civilization. They are covered extensively in the book Temples of the African Gods. The circled walls found in this site are estimated to go up to 1,500 square kilometers, although each wall is only 5 meters high in places. However, the walls were far taller in its time, which would have been affected due to weather erosion. To make the site more interesting, it's geologically situated beside numerous gold mines, and it has been suggested they were the first gold miners. Carved on the walls of this ancient city, researchers have found engravings that include the Ankh, the Egyptian symbol for life and fertility. How is it that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands years before the ancient Egyptian civilization, that we found the symbol of the Ankh here in southern Africa? We have already seen how genetic studies have shown that the ancient Egyptian Kemetu migrated from Central and South Africa along the Nile, and finally settled in the region we called Egypt today before dispersing all over Africa. Although these discoveries match, the time frame that we are looking at is truly outstanding, and it may point to a more sophisticated human civilization, much older than anything else we have seen. This temple in Egypt is by far the strangest temple in the whole of Egypt, and for all we know, it may not even be from the ancient Egyptian civilization. Discovered in 1903 at the tail end of the Temple of Seti I, the Osireion looks nothing like the temple that mainstream archaeologists are associating it to. The architecture is different, the stone sizes are completely different, and the Osireion has absolutely no markings on any of its walls, while the Temple of Seti I, from the 19th dynasty, is completely adorned with hieroglyphs. In fact, many have speculated that the Temple of Seti I was built in an L shape, because as they started to build the pharaoh's temple, then encountered this amazing older temple and decided to build around it. Others, on the other hand, say that Seti built his temple there to take advantage of the existing site and its properties which we will see are pretty particular. Here is a side-by-side comparison of the walls of Seti I and the Osireion. I will let you decide for yourself whether they were built as part of the same complex, or better yet, if they were from the same era. The temple itself is completely underground and is completely submerged, and it is so deep that it goes to a depth of 15 meters. That's 5 stories deep. The inner island has been scanned with a seismometer, and it shows that there is an inner chamber somewhere inside. And you might be thinking, what is inside this chamber hidden in the middle island? Well, we don't know, because we haven't been able to remove all the water from the Osireion. In the 1910s, they tried to pump the water out, and they couldn't. In the 1920s, they tried again, and couldn't. Lately, they brought in modern machinery to try and pump the water out at the rate of 500 gallons per minute, and still couldn't do it. This is puzzling to scientists because the water from the Osireion is completely separate from the Nile River. This has been shown by tests, but whatever that water source is, it is strong enough that even modern machinery hasn't been able to match its refill rate. And then add to that the fact that the inner temperature of the water of the Osireion is maintained at an odd 23 degrees, while the surface temperature is maintained at 17.5 degrees. Nobody can explain this. Oh, I forgot to mention, all the huge blocks of stones used to build the Osireion were not made of limestone but granite, which is much harder and heavier to handle. And tests have shown that it is granite from Aswan, hundreds of miles away and kilometers away from the banks of the Nile. How they did it, and why they did it, is a mystery to us. There are so many other crazy facts about the Osireion that I couldn't include in this video, but follow me if you want to find out more in upcoming videos on this monument, which is now one of my favorites in the whole of the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex. In the late 20th century, a groundbreaking discovery challenged our understanding of ancient trade routes and cultural exchanges. Scientists analyzing Egyptian mummies uncovered traces of substances that should not have been present: cocaine and tobacco, both plants native to the Americas, and thought to be unknown in the Old World before Columbus's voyages. In 1992, German toxicologist Dr. Svetlana Balabanova published her findings after examining several Egyptian mummies, including the well-known priestess Henut Tawi, who lived around 1000 BCE. Using advanced techniques such as gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, Balabanova and her team detected significant levels of cocaine and nicotine in the hair, skin, and bones of these mummies. These results were unexpected, as both cocaine and tobacco are derived from plants native to South America, thousands of miles away from ancient Egypt. Balabanova's findings were met with skepticism and controversy. Critics argued that the results could be due to contamination or methodological errors. However, repeated analyses by independent researchers confirmed the presence of these substances, suggesting that the initial results were not merely coincidental or flawed. The presence of these New World drugs in Egyptian mummies raises profound questions about the extent of ancient global interactions. How could substances from the Americas have ended up in ancient Egyptian remains long before established transatlantic contact? Several hypotheses have emerged, ranging from the possibility of pre-Columbian transoceanic voyages to the idea of isolated plant species being spread through unknown ancient trade routes. Despite the skepticism, some scholars propose that ancient African seafarers might have made contact across the oceans much earlier than traditionally believed. If true, this would imply a level of maritime capability and intercultural exchange that significantly predates Columbus's voyages. It would also explain how ancient African technology, science, religion, and building techniques have been found all over the world. The many elephant motifs in Mesoamerican art present a problem for the current historical narrative. Because elephants were not native to the Americas during the periods when these cultures flourished, these motifs have sparked debates about pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories, suggesting that ancient Mesoamerican civilizations might have had knowledge of or contact with cultures from Africa or Asia where elephants are indigenous. The most well-known instances of these motifs were discovered in the Olmec civilization, primarily from sites like La Venta and San Lorenzo, dating between 1200 and 400 BCE. The Olmecs are considered one of Mesoamerica's earliest complex societies, renowned for their colossal stone heads and sophisticated artistic traditions. Elephantine features in Olmec art include representations that bear striking resemblances to the trunk, large ears, and tusks of elephants. One notable example is a carved stone figure known as El Rey, found at La Venta, which exhibits facial characteristics unmistakably akin to an elephant's trunk and tusks. Additionally, artifacts from the Maya civilization, such as the stucco friezes at the site of Uxmal, dating from the Classic period, circa 250–900 CE, also show elephant-like figures. These depictions have similar distinctive features: elongated trunks, large ears, and even the suggestion of tusks. Such consistent anatomical specificity across different sites and periods implies a deliberate representation of an animal that these cultures would otherwise not have encountered. The presence of these elephant motifs is odd primarily because it challenges the conventional understanding that pre-Columbian Mesoamerican civilizations had no contact with the Old World, where elephants were known. This discrepancy has led to various hypotheses, including the possibility of ancient transoceanic voyages, or the transmission of ideas through unknown intermediaries. The idea that these motifs could represent animals other than elephants has been largely dismissed due to the anatomical accuracy in the depictions. The creatures in question possess defining elephantine characteristics that are not easily attributable to New World fauna. The closest native animal, the tapir, lacks the significant features such as the prominent trunk and large fan-like ears that are distinctly seen in these carvings and artworks. Further examples include pottery and sculptures from the Zapotec and Toltec cultures, which also exhibit these motifs, albeit less prominently. The widespread and consistent representation across different Mesoamerican cultures strengthens the argument that these were indeed meant to depict elephants, despite the absence of such creatures in the region. When you combine the representation of African elephants in Mesoamerican, especially Olmec culture, with the Olmec heads, then we are left wondering about a missing chapter in African history pointing to prolonged contact and influence. The Dendera light is a particularly controversial topic since it is not exactly an artifact of potential ancient technology, but the possible depiction of such an artifact on a wall of one of the best preserved ancient temples in Egypt, the temple of the Egyptian goddess Hathor at Dendera. The image known as the Dendera light is found on 3 stone reliefs in the temple and, at first glance, could be construed as a bulb similar to a Crookes tube, with a lotus socket at one end, a cable traveling underneath, and a snake-shaped cord filament inside. In the most popular representation of the so-called Dendera light, a priest is shown holding up the lamp, and a few smaller figures are seen below it. One of the figures appears to be directing the light bulb upwards. A two-armed jed pillar is also shown with the bulb, and the hands are apparently connected to the snake cord inside. A baboon is presented in front of the lamp while holding two knives in front of itself. A Norwegian electrical engineer was the first to propose that this image depicted an electrical lamp. Austrian authors Peter Krasse and Rainer Habeck brought the hypothesis to worldwide attention when they published a book based on the Dendera reliefs titled Light of the Pharaohs, High Technology and Electricity in Ancient Egypt, by W. Garn, another electrical engineer, later tested the hypothesis and constructed a working model of the Dendera light. In an English translation of an excerpt from the book, Garn is quoted as saying, "If we evacuate a glass bulb with two metal parts reaching into it, we can see a discharge at much lower levels, depending on the size of the glass balloon. At a pressure of about 40 tons, 40 millimeters of mercury, a snake-like light filament meanders from one metal part to the other. If we evacuate further, the light filament grows wider until it fills the whole glass balloon. This is exactly what we see on the pictures in the subterranean chambers of the Hathor sanctuary." If this is true, then it would mean that our ancestors from Africa had already discovered electricity and made use of it well before it was rediscovered in the 1700s by Benjamin Franklin. Originally discovered by NASA astronauts while they were in orbit, the Richat structure has quickly become one of those areas of interest because of the large number of questions he leaves. Historians and archaeologists have tried to claim that the Richat structure is an impact crater. However, it is clear that none of the evidence so far supports this. Further to this, there are no impact craters on Earth that look anything remotely close to the Richat structure. Even if we discard the modern assumptions that the Richat structure could be the location of Atlantis, this site presents lots of oddities. For example, high-resolution aeromagnetic scans of the Richat structures have been performed, and this is what they show: that the patterns are inconsistent with natural formation and consistent with man-made dikes. I will leave the link to the paper below. When you consider that the location, the shape of the circular concentric rings, and geological evidence all match the description of Atlantis, it makes this Western Sahara site even more interesting. The most striking similarities is that the structure would have 3 rings of water and 3 of land, an opening to the sea at the south, mountains to the north, black and white-colored stones, an abundance of iron, copper, and gold, presence of vegetation and elephants, which were all known to be present during the Green Sahara. But the site also has an abundance of salt, clearly showing that seawater was there in abundance after the Sahara was green, providing further proof that a sea-sourced flood rushed through the region. But the biggest enigma is who built this, and when was it in use? There is a multitude of archaeological evidence showing that there was a human presence in the region, who built this magnificent 25 kilometers fortress, this 15-mile unusual structure. Whoever it is, it would have required an enormous amount of industry, planning, and a very large population to maintain. In 1944, during World War II, a Royal Australian Air Force serviceman named Maury Eisenberg discovered several medieval East African coins on a beach in the Wessel Islands, off the coast of northern Australia. These coins, originating from the Kilwa Sultanate in modern-day Tanzania, date back to the 12th century, making them the oldest foreign artifacts found in Australia. The Kilwa Sultanate was a powerful East African trading empire from the 10th to 15th centuries, well known for its extensive trade networks across the Indian Ocean, which connected Africa to Arabia, Persia, India, and Southeast Asia. The presence of these coins in Australia suggests that there may have been contact between Kilwa traders and the indigenous peoples of northern Australia long before European explorers arrived in the 17th century. The discovery of these coins has sparked significant interest and debate among historians and archaeologists. Some theories propose that the coins could have been brought to Australia by early Southeast Asian or Indonesian traders who had established trade routes with Kilwa. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that the region's Aboriginal oral histories contain accounts of contact with foreign visitors. When Flinders Petrie found the first of the stone vases of the Old Kingdom in ancient Egypt, he immediately recognized that some advanced carving process was used. These 5,500-year-old vases are perfect. And when we say perfect, we mean perfect in a way that requires computer 3D scanning and laser-precise cutting with diamond tip tooling to replicate today. So perfect that this level of craftsmanship wouldn't be seen again until the modern computer-assisted engineering age of the 21st century. These artifacts, often created from incredibly hard stones, such as diorite, granite, and basalt, continue to baffle historians and archaeologists with their precision, sophistication, and the sheer difficulty of their construction. Diorite and granite both have a Mohs hardness of 6 to 7, while basalt has a hardness of around 6. To contextualize, these stones are considerably harder than steel, which ranks around 4 to 4.5 on the Mohs scale. Working these materials required tools made of even harder substances or techniques that could effectively abrade or carve these tough stones. The ancient craftsmen would have had to apply immense pressure and maintain precise control to shape the stone without causing cracks or breaks. The challenge was compounded by the need to achieve smooth surfaces, sharp angles, and intricate details, especially in the vase handles. The precision of Old Kingdom vases is nothing short of astonishing. Modern scanning technologies, including CT scans and 3D imaging, have allowed us to examine these artifacts in greater detail than ever before. These scans have revealed that many vases have walls that are remarkably thin, sometimes less than a millimeter thick. The uniformity and smoothness of both the inner and outer surfaces are just outstanding. One of the most perplexing features of these vases is the precision with which the handles are integrated. The handles are not merely attached, but are an integral part of the vase, carved from the same piece of stone. This integration requires an exceptional level of skill because any mistake in carving could ruin the entire piece. As much as we think that the vases were turned to achieve such symmetrical precision, the handles could not have been turned because they protrude out of the body of the vase. Further adding to the enigma are the smaller vases, some only a few centimeters tall. These miniature vases present an even greater challenge. The precision required to create such small objects with the same thin walls and integrated handles is astonishing. Modern jewelers and stone carvers, equipped with advanced tools, would find replicating these vases an impossible task without using laser-precise tools. The complications increase exponentially as the size decreases, requiring an even steadier hand and greater attention to detail. So when we combine the size of these vases and the fact that they are symmetrical to 1,000 of an inch, so more symmetrical than the engineering used in building modern cars and airplanes, then we have to put into question the current narrative that historians claim. The Ptolemaic maps, crafted by Claudius Ptolemy in the 2nd century CE, are extraordinary for their detail and long-lasting influence on geography. Ptolemy's Geographia compiled the known world's geographical knowledge, setting a precedent for future explorers and map-makers. When the Greeks came to Africa in 343 BC, they had a clear plan of learning as much of the ancient knowledge from the African sciences as possible. Just like Pythagoras, Solon, Euclid, Thales, Plato, Herodotus, who all studied in Africa before they posited their sciences, Claudius Ptolemy spent his entire professional life in Upper Egypt. At the time, Nubio-Kemetic priests were versed in math, medicine, astrology, chemistry, and many other sciences. One remarkable aspect of these maps is their implicit recognition of a spherical Earth. Ptolemy used a latitude and longitude system to plot locations, a method that acknowledges the Earth's curvature. This approach reflected an understanding of the globe's roundness, even if the maps did not visually represent a fully accurate globe. Historians today are adamant that Ptolemy did not represent Antarctica in his maps, and that the southern land masses shown in the maps were speculative lands that the ancient cartographer added to, quote, balance the land masses. The problem with this is that the coastline of the land masses in Antarctica are too similar to the ice-free land masses of the southern continent to be a mere coincidence. So how did a map, at the turn of the first millennia, show an advanced system of latitude and longitude, an understanding of a round Earth, along with calculations that allow for proportional mapping on a sphere? How did they know about the Antarctic the way it would have appeared during the last ice melt at the end of the Younger Dryas? Well, it's probably all a coincidence. The colossal stone heads of the Olmec civilization, dating back to at least 1200 BCE, are among the most intriguing and debated artifacts in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. These massive sculptures, weighing several tons and standing up to 11 feet tall, depict human faces with distinctive features that some researchers suggest have connections to West African iconography and physical characteristics. Many of the Olmec heads are adorned with elaborate headdresses that resemble the headgear worn by various West African cultures. These headdresses often feature bands, beads, and patterns that are strikingly similar to those found in African art and ceremonial dress. The resemblance has led some scholars to hypothesize that there may have been transatlantic contact between West Africa and Mesoamerica long before the arrival of Europeans. The Olmec heads exhibit facial features such as broad noses, full lips, and pronounced cheekbones, which are often associated with African phenotypes. These features contrast sharply with the facial characteristics typical of Native American populations in the region. When you add to the large number of pre-Columbian African remains found in Mesoamerica, we again have to question the official narrative of current historians. In fact, some of the Olmec heads depict what appears to be tightly coiled, nappy hair. This type of hair texture is predominantly found in populations of African descent and is not characteristic of Native American or Australasian peoples, who generally have straight or wavy hair. The juxtaposition of these anomalous glyphs with the surrounding, more typical Egyptian carvings only amplifies their peculiarity. When examining the Seti temple's broader iconographic context, one sees a comprehensive visual narrative steeped in religious, royal, and daily life themes of ancient Egypt. The sudden appearance of what seems to be advanced technology within this tableau is jarring. For instance, nearby carvings depict Seti I's interactions with the gods, ritual scenes, and symbolic depictions of pharaonic power, all rendered in the familiar style of the New Kingdom period. The helicopter and saucer forms break this visual consistency, presenting a stark contrast that invites further scrutiny. Exploring the broader corpus of Egyptian art and inscriptions, there is a notable absence of anything remotely resembling these forms. The vast array of artifacts recovered from other temples, tombs, and pyramids shows a consistent thematic and stylistic approach that aligns with the Egyptian symbolic and religious worldview. Whether it is the sacred geometry of pyramids, the meticulous depiction of gods and goddesses, or the detailed chronicles of pharaonic achievements, the art of ancient Egypt adheres to a set of aesthetic and symbolic conventions. The helicopter and saucer carvings do not conform to these conventions, standing out as anomalies in the archaeological record. The Temple of Abydos, particularly its Seti I temple, has been a focal point of historical and archaeological intrigue for decades. One of the most compelling aspects that capture both scholarly and public attention is the so-called helicopter and saucer hieroglyphs found on a lintel in the structure. These carvings have sparked a multitude of interpretations, from ancient alien theories to explanations rooted in conventional Egyptology. Funny enough, this is the same temple where we find the Osireion monument. The helicopter glyph is notable for its distinct resemblance to a modern-day helicopter, complete with what appear to be rotor blades and a fuselage. Such a depiction is starkly different from traditional Egyptian iconography, which typically includes depictions of gods, pharaohs, animals, and hieroglyphic inscriptions. The precision of the carving, coupled with its modern semblance, raises immediate questions about its origins. Egyptian carvings are usually characterized by their symbolic and stylized forms rather than realistic or anachronistic representations. The juxtaposition of these anomalous glyphs with the surrounding, more typical Egyptian carvings only amplifies their peculiarity. When examining the Seti I temple's broader iconographic context, one sees a comprehensive visual narrative steeped in religious, royal, and daily life themes of ancient Egypt. The sudden appearance of what seems to be advanced technology within this tableau is jarring. For instance, nearby carvings depict Seti I's interactions with the gods, ritual scenes, and symbolic depictions of pharaonic power, all rendered in the familiar style of the New Kingdom period. The helicopter and saucer forms break this visual consistency, presenting a stark contrast that invites further scrutiny. Exploring the broader corpus of Egyptian art and inscriptions, there is a notable absence of anything remotely resembling these forms. The vast array of artifacts recovered from other temples, tombs, and pyramids shows a consistent thematic and stylistic approach that aligns with the Egyptian symbolic and religious worldview. Whether it is the sacred geometry of pyramids, the meticulous depiction of gods and goddesses, or the detailed chronicles of pharaonic achievements, the art of ancient Egypt adheres to a set of aesthetic and symbolic conventions. The helicopter and saucer carvings do not conform to these conventions, standing out as anomalies in the archaeological record. The biggest mystery of all from ancient Africa is how you have watched the video to this point without hitting the like button or becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. The study of history requires us to be open-minded, because without recognizing that what we have been taught so far may be wrong, we will continue to repeat the same mistakes and build on assumptions that are completely wrong. If you want to go deeper into how our assumptions about the past have misled us, watch episode 14, where we cover the true origin of the ancient Egyptians. Also, check out episode 18 on the rulers of medieval Europe, episode 16 on the beginnings of ancient China, and episode 19 on the missing link in ancient history, from the builders of Göbekli Tepe to the inventors of agriculture. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself.